What if your life, this very moment, held the blueprint to become something more, something greater than human? Not someday, not symbolically, but right here in your own skin. What if the line between mortal and divine wasn't a wall, but a staircase, waiting for your first step? Close your eyes and imagine this. A man is chosen, not because of his power, but because of his righteousness. And unlike the rest of humanity, death never finds him. Instead, the skies themselves part. One by one, the heavens open, like majestic gates revealing deeper and deeper chambers of sacred light. And as he passes through, something unimaginable begins to occur. His body starts to shift. His skin ignites, not with pain, but with purpose. His eyes no longer simply see. They blaze like wheels of fire. His very name is stripped from him, only to be replaced with something divine. Enoch, the man, becomes Metatron, the angelic force who sits beside the divine itself. This isn't fiction. This isn't a bedtime tale. It's a mystical account buried deep in ancient texts, stories not often told in your average temple or church, but preserved on the edge of religious orthodoxy by secretive mystics and forgotten scribes. Two rare and astonishing works, known as Second Enoch and Third Enoch, hold within them the story of one man's total transformation. Not figurative, not poetic, real in the minds of those who preserved it. This is the story of a human being ascending through the very architecture of the cosmos, shedding their earthly nature to sit among the divine. You're watching Mind Manifestor, where we uncover humanity's most powerful forgotten truths. And today, we dive deep into one of the most radical ideas ever imagined in spiritual history, that human beings might not just aspire to divinity, but actually embody it. Enoch's tale begins not with lightning or a trumpet blast, but in quiet simplicity. He is lying in his bed, aged 365 years, an age that mirrors the solar calendar, hinting that Enoch himself is more than a man. He is a symbol of cosmic harmony. Suddenly, two immense beings appear beside him. They are not of this world. Their faces shine brighter than the sun. Their eyes glow like eternal flames. Wings, like radiant gold, unfurl behind them. They speak a single truth. The Eternal has summoned him. But this is no death. This is no dream. It is an invitation to step beyond the veil, to climb a ladder few even know exists. And so Enoch rises. He passes through the first heaven, then the second, ascending through layers of reality so dazzling and surreal that even the language of Scripture strains to describe them. In each realm, he encounters mysteries, storehouses of snow, celestial administrators, stars with minds of their own, realms that guard the memory of Eden and the tree of life itself. But these are only the outskirts, the edge of the divine metropolis. By the time he reaches the seventh heaven, Enoch stands on the precipice of the infinite. And here, in the court of the divine, something extraordinary happens. The archangel Michael approaches, not with judgment, but with anointing. He strips Enoch of his earthly garments. He pours upon him an oil, not of this world, but like dew that glows with sweetness and divine radiance. Enoch's form begins to shift. He looks down and sees he is no longer what he once was. He has become something else, something glorious, something that blurs the line between man and angel. But is this where the transformation ends? Or is it just the beginning? If you're enjoying this journey through one of the most astonishing tales in mystical history, consider subscribing to Mind Manifestor. These stories of transformation, ascension, and forgotten truths are just the beginning. Your path to understanding the deeper mysteries of existence starts here. Now back to Enoch. Second Enoch, preserved in ancient Slavonic, gives us the framework of his ascent. But the true climax, the stunning culmination of this transformation, is revealed in a later Hebrew text known as Third Enoch. Here we meet a very different Enoch, one who has not only witnessed heaven, but who has become heaven's citizen, its ruler even. But before we reach that climax, let's pause and ask a question that might shake the foundation of everything we've been told. If a human being can become an angel, then what does that say about us? Are we truly limited by our biology? Are angels an entirely separate order of being? Or are humans simply angels who have forgotten how to climb? This idea isn't isolated. Across ancient cultures, we see echoes of this same belief. In the Greco-Roman world, mystery religions like the Eleusinian and Orphic rites spoke of symbolic deaths and rebirths, where the initiate sheds their lower self to emerge touched by divinity. In the Hermetic tradition, Hermes Trismegistus writes of an ascent through planetary spheres, each level stripping away earthly traits until only pure divine intelligence remains. Even in the Mithraic cult, followers climbed a 7-step ladder, each rung representing a celestial body, each step an act of purification. Early Christianity, too, has its own ascent stories. The ascension of Isaiah, for instance, speaks of prophets rising through heavenly realms, each level more dazzling and secretive than the last. But what makes the Enochian account unique is its insistence that the change isn't just spiritual. It's physical, literal. Enoch doesn't dream of fire. He becomes fire. This isn't metaphor. It's metamorphosis. The 7 heavens Enoch passes through aren't abstract concepts. They're real in the ancient mind, architectural, concrete, each one a layer in the cosmic order. The first heaven holds the winds and atmospheric forces. The second contains the rebellious watchers, angels who fell after lusting for human women. The third, paradise itself. Eden, yes, but also the waiting place of the righteous dead. Higher still lie the heavens that govern time, the machinery of stars, the circuits of sun and moon. And finally, the 7th, the dwelling of God, the uncreated light, the source. This idea of layered heaven wasn't exclusive to Enoch's story. The Apostle Paul in the New Testament describes being caught up to the 3rd heaven, where he hears unspeakable things. The Testament of Levi mentions 7 layers of heaven. So does the Apocalypse of Abraham. What all these texts agree on is simple: heaven is not one place but many, and it is structured. But here's where Enoch's tale breaks every rule. Other mystics return. Enoch does not. He stays, and in staying he becomes. The text describes his transformation with increasing awe. He is not only clothed in garments of light, he is gifted with knowledge, divine knowledge, past, present, future, the movement of stars, the origin of life, the fate of the world. Everything is unveiled. He becomes a scribe of the cosmos. He writes 360 books of sacred wisdom. For 40 days, he shares these revelations with his family. And then, he ascends once more. This time, there is no return. 2nd Enoch ends quietly. They took Enoch to the heavens, it says. But what does that mean? What happened when he finally left his humanity behind? That's the question 3rd Enoch dares to answer. And in doing so, it offers one of the most dramatic transformations in all of spiritual literature. Enoch becomes something that defies imagination. An angel not just among angels, but above them. A being so radiant, so powerful, that even the celestial hosts bow before him. A man who now sits beside God. The next phase of this journey is where we uncover the heart of the mystery. The making of Metatron, the lesser YHWH. A being of flame, wisdom, and infinite eyes. And if that transformation was possible for one, what might it mean for all of us? Can you sense the theological shockwaves this story would send through the heart of religious tradition? In Judaism, only God holds the right to be worshipped. Only God sits upon the eternal throne of power. The very name of God, YHWH, often called the Tetragrammaton, is considered so sacred that it is forbidden to utter it aloud. Yet, here, in the ancient texts, we encounter a human being who not only ascends but becomes so transformed that he receives divine rights and attributes, prerogatives once reserved solely for God. This notion was so radical that it stirred fierce opposition. In the Babylonian Talmud, there's a story of a heretic named Elisha ben Abiah, a man who ascended into paradise and saw Metatron seated upon God's throne, acting as if he held divine authority. Upon witnessing this, Elisha concludes that heaven harbors not one, but 2 powers, a heretical belief that sharply challenges the foundation of Jewish monotheism. According to the tale, in an effort to correct this perceived error, Metatron is struck with 60 lashes of fire, symbolizing a reminder that no being, no matter how exalted, can occupy the divine throne beside God. The message here is unmistakable. Even Metatron, despite his profound transformation, cannot be a second God. Yet, the very existence of this story tells us something crucial. The belief in Metatron's near-divinity was not some isolated fringe idea. It was widespread enough to provoke an official condemnation, a reflection of how deeply this idea had taken root in mystical circles. But this controversy only scratches the surface of Metatron's role in the divine hierarchy. Third Enoch assigns him an array of titles that push the boundaries of monotheism, revealing his immense importance within the heavenly realm. He is not just any angel. He is the prince of the divine presence, standing eternally before God's throne. He is the angel of the Lord, the very figure who appeared to Moses in the burning bush, heralding God's eternal covenant with Israel. He is also portrayed as a youthful being, perhaps a symbolic nod to his once human origin, forever young in his angelic form. He is the celestial scribe, recording every action in the heavenly books, and the guide who leads souls through the afterlife. He serves as the intercessor, presenting the prayers of Israel before God. In the mystical traditions of the Kabbalah, Metatron rises even higher. He is said to embody the sapphire of Keter, the crown, representing the highest level of divine emanation. Here, he is described as the Chancellor of Heaven, a being who administers God's will throughout the entire cosmos. Some sources even associate Metatron with the angel who led Israel through the wilderness, the one of whom God said, "My name is in him." This phrase becomes the theological justification for calling Metatron the Lesser YHWH, or the Lesser Yahweh. It is a title that stirs up intense debate, for it places Metatron, a transformed human being, in the most exalted category of divine beings. Yet, here's the question that underpins every interpretation of Third Enoch. Is this an example of theology, describing how heaven is structured and who holds what position? Or is it something deeper, perhaps a mystical guidebook offering a map for human transformation? Could it be suggesting that Enoch's transformation into Metatron was not a one-off event, but a model for others to follow? The more you dive into these texts, the more you realize that it's both. For the Merkavah mystics, Jewish visionaries of the late antiquity who specialized in celestial ascent and the divine chariot, the Merkavah, Enoch's journey wasn't unique. It was the template for spiritual transcendence. These mystics would engage in dangerous ascensions through the heavenly palaces, reciting sacred incantations, invoking mystical seals, and facing fierce angelic guardians. Their goal wasn't just to witness the heavens, but to participate in them. They sought to transform themselves through theurgical practices, rituals designed to elevate their souls and bodies, until they, too, could enter God's presence, just as Enoch had. Now, let's step back for a moment and think about the broader context. This isn't a concept confined to Jewish mysticism. In fact, ancient traditions across the world shared similar ideas about human beings ascending to divine status. In the Greco-Roman world, emperors were often deified after death. Figures like Julius Caesar, Augustus, and Hadrian were declared gods and worshipped in temples with crowns of radiant light. Even the legendary hero Heracles ascended Mount Olympus to join the gods, as did Romulus, who was taken up in a whirlwind and transformed into the god Quirinus. For ancient pagans, these ascensions weren't mere metaphors. The line between mortal and divine wasn't as rigid as we might think today. There was a belief that, for certain exceptional individuals, it was possible to cross that boundary and achieve divinity. Early Christianity absorbed and reinterpreted these ideas. Jesus, for example, ascends to heaven in the New Testament and sits at the right hand of God. At the Transfiguration, his physical form changes, his face shining like the sun, his clothes becoming dazzling white. The Book of Revelation further describes him as having eyes like flames and a face like the blazing sun. In fact, some early Christian sects, particularly the Gnostics, taught that certain souls could undergo a process of ascent through the heavens. They believed that, by shedding their ignorance and material constraints, these souls could ultimately be reabsorbed into the divine pleroma, or fullness. However, unlike Enochic mysticism, which suggested that this transformation was possible for all humans, Christianity typically reserved this ascent for Jesus alone, the unique God-man who bridged the gap between humanity and divinity. But the Enochic tradition didn't reserve this path for one individual. It argued that what happened to Enoch was not a singular, divine exception. It was a model of what humanity could potentially achieve. The question then becomes, could human beings truly achieve such a radical transformation? Could we, too, follow in Enoch's footsteps? This brings us to a fascinating debate among scholars. Is Second Enoch and Third Enoch preserving genuine, ancient mystical traditions, or are these later inventions? And if they are authentic, what does that say about the nature of human potential? Let's start with what we know. Second Enoch, sometimes called Slavonic Enoch or the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, survives in Old Church Slavonic manuscripts. No Hebrew or Aramaic versions have been found, which means we are dealing with a translation of an earlier text, likely written sometime between the 1st century BCE and the 1st century CE. Some scholars argue that it was written even earlier, possibly contemporaneous with the Dead Sea Scrolls or the earliest Christian writings. Others suggest a later date, perhaps from the 14th century, based on the manuscript's survival in Church Slavonic, but the text itself is much older. Third Enoch, written in Hebrew, is easier to date. It's widely regarded as a product of Merkavah mysticism in the late antiquity, likely composed between the 5th and 6th centuries CE. This makes it significantly later than Second Enoch. But the question remains, can Third Enoch truly reflect an authentic continuation of earlier Jewish traditions, or is it a newer invention, influenced by Christian angelology? Interestingly, references to Metatron appear before Third Enoch was written down. The Babylonian Talmud, compiled between the 3rd and 6th centuries CE, mentions Metatron several times, but always with a sense of discomfort. The name appears in magical texts and amulets, and even in the Targums, Aramaic translations of the Hebrew Bible, where Metatron is sometimes identified with the angel of the Lord. This suggests that the Metatron tradition wasn't an invention of the 5th century. It was already circulating within Jewish communities long before Third Enoch was penned. Furthermore, earlier Jewish texts like First Enoch and the Book of Jubilees also depict Enoch as an exalted figure, someone who ascends through the heavens and is entrusted with cosmic knowledge. So, while Third Enoch takes the idea of Enoch's transformation to a dramatic extreme, it's rooted in an ancient tradition. Now, scholars continue to debate whether the Metatron mythology of Third Enoch represents a true continuation of these ancient traditions, or if it's a new invention, perhaps shaped by Christian notions of divine hierarchy and angelic authority. What's clear, however, is that the transformation of Enoch into Metatron raises important questions not only about Jewish theology but also about the nature of human potential. As we move forward, we'll explore how this idea challenges not only ancient conceptions of the divine but also our modern understanding of what it means to transcend the human condition. Could it be that these ancient mystical traditions are more than just relics of a forgotten past? Could they hold clues to something deeper, something that speaks to the very essence of who we are and who we might one day become? The debate around Enoch and Metatron continues to stir minds, modern and ancient alike, because both perspectives carry deep insights. On one side, we have the undeniable pattern, a just morally upright figure ascending into the heavens and undergoing glorification. This pattern is not a late invention. It's an ancient spiritual structure that runs through many mystical traditions. On the other hand, the bold theological concept of Metatron as a being nearly equivalent to God, as the lesser YHWH, likely emerged later in history. But here's the thing, the transition between the early stories and later doctrines doesn't feel like a leap. It feels like evolution, a continuous unfolding of an idea, not a fabrication. And this is where things get especially fascinating, because this debate isn't just about dates and doctrines. It's about something much deeper, the shared spiritual DNA between religious systems. Judaism, Christianity, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, none of these belief systems developed in isolation. They weren't airtight vaults. They were porous, fluid, and dynamic. Ideas flowed between them like rivers feeding a shared sea of sacred imagination. And right in the middle of that convergence is the Enochic tradition. Let's take a closer look at the striking similarities. In Gnostic Christianity, the Savior doesn't just die and rise again. He descends from the highest spiritual realm, takes on human flesh, and ascends once more, leaving behind secret teachings to liberate other souls. The Gnostic path is all about escaping ignorance, shedding the heavy layers of matter, and returning to the divine light from which we came. In Hermetic literature, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, the reader is encouraged to ascend through the spheres of the planets, each level stripping away illusion and false identity. The message is clear. You are more than you believe, and the path upward is open, if you're willing to walk it. Neoplatonism echoes this structure with its idea of emanation and return. The soul begins in unity with the One, descends into the world through layers of being, and then, through philosophy, virtue, and contemplation, ascends once again into divine reunion. The same sacred architecture appears again and again. Descent, incarnation, revelation, ascent, transformation. The Enoch stories are not anomalies. They are part of a wider, ancient conversation about the divine potential inside the human being. A conversation that asks not just if we can change, but why we ever felt the need to. And that raises one of the most powerful questions of all. Why have humans, across so many cultures and time periods, been obsessed with the idea of becoming more than themselves? What is it about our human condition that stirs this hunger to rise above it? Whether it's the philosopher yearning for wisdom, the mystic striving for union, or the ordinary person just trying to live a meaningful life, something inside us has always reached upward. And the Enochic tradition doesn't just acknowledge this yearning. It dares to answer it. In ancient myths, we hear of mortals who get close to the gods. But it's always the gods who grant transformation as a favor. Ganymede is taken by Zeus to Olympus, not because of his efforts, but because of divine whim. Psyche, after enduring tests, is rewarded with immortality and divine marriage. Aristeas is granted a place among the immortals for his contributions to agriculture. Aeneas journeys to the underworld, glimpses destiny, and returns as a founding figure for an eternal empire. These stories are powerful, but in all of them, transformation is a gift, not an earned achievement. Enoch's journey stands apart. It's not just something that happens to him, it's something he becomes. The text emphasizes over and over, Enoch walked with God. That phrase signals not just obedience, but intimacy, connection, a moral clarity that transcends behavior. His transformation doesn't feel random. It feels inevitable, the flowering of a righteous soul reaching its true form. In this way, the Enoch narrative aligns more with ancient mystery traditions than mythological ones. Take the Eleusinian mysteries, for example. In these secretive rituals, initiates didn't wait for death to hope for change. They believed transformation could happen in this life. They gathered in the Telesterion, a great chamber of initiation. There, through rites known only to the few, they underwent a symbolic death and rebirth. Though the details were kept secret, ancient sources hint that participants experienced revelations about Persephone's descent and return, a powerful metaphor for the soul's cycle and liberation. The Orphic mysteries went even further. They taught that the soul itself was divine but trapped in a mortal shell. The goal wasn't simply moral living, it was remembrance. The soul had to remember its true nature, purify itself, and, at death, break the cycle of rebirth. Some were buried with golden tablets inscribed with passwords for the underworld. One reads, "I am a child of earth and starry heaven, but my race is of heaven alone." Sound familiar? It should. Enoch, too, ascends through layered heavens, shedding his mortal identity. His body turns to fire. His eyes become radiant wheels. He is no longer bound to human frailty. He doesn't just witness the divine, he becomes something divine. Yet there's a key difference. In most mystery religions, this transformation was internal, symbolic, a psychological shift. But in Enoch's tale, the change is literal, external, physical. His body doesn't remain human, it becomes something other. Or does it? Here's where ancient and modern interpreters split in fascinating ways. To the literalists, especially among the Merkavah mystics, Enoch's transformation was actual. It happened. A man became an angel. This wasn't symbolic, This was spiritual physics. God, in divine power, could change flesh into fire, mortality into eternity, and if it happened once, perhaps it could happen again. This belief didn't just lead to speculation. It led to practice. The Hekkalot literature, collections of mystical Jewish texts, describe how to ascend through heaven's palaces. These weren't metaphors. These were instructions. Fast. Meditate. Chant the divine names. Assume the posture. Visualize the seals. Whisper the passwords. And rise. But the journey was dangerous. Each level of heaven was guarded by beings of immense power. If the mystic was pure enough, righteous enough, they could pass. But if they made a mistake, if they were impure, arrogant, or unprepared, they would be cast down, burned, lost. The texts are clear, many tried. Few succeeded. Yet, from a modern psychological lens, the story shifts. Thinkers like Carl Jung would interpret Metatron not as a literal being but as a symbol of the integrated self, the perfected psyche. The process of ascending through heavens becomes a metaphor for the inner journey, what Jung called individuation. Each heaven is a level of consciousness. Each gatekeeper a psychological defense. The fire isn't destruction, it's alchemy. The transformation is the death of the false self and the birth of the true one. Even Metatron's throne can be reinterpreted, not as a challenge to God, but as the rightful seat of the ego in service to the self. Not dominance, not confusion, but harmony. And here's the beautiful paradox. This interpretation doesn't erase the ancient meanings. It deepens them. In fact, medieval Kabbalists often embraced both views at once. Enoch literally ascended, yes, but his story also pointed to spiritual ascent. Through the Sphirot, the mystical emanations of divine light, each soul could climb from Malkuth, the physical world, to Keter, the crown of divine consciousness. The tree of life became a ladder, just like the heavens. And the goal? Union with the divine spark inside us. The 16th century mystic Isaac Luria developed this further. He taught that the world was shattered, divine light trapped in material fragments. The purpose of human life? To gather those sparks, to lift them back, to repair creation through action, prayer, and intention. Enoch's story became not just a legend, but a cosmic roadmap. Christian mystics explored similar ideas. Church fathers like Maximus the Confessor spoke of theosis, the belief that humans are meant to participate in God's nature, not by becoming God, but by becoming fully human, perfected through divine grace. Athanasius famously wrote, "God became man so that man might become God." This wasn't blasphemy. It was the ultimate hope of salvation. But the distinction matters. In Christianity, this transformation is reserved for the afterlife or mediated through Christ. In Enoch's story, it happens now, in this life, to a mortal who walked with God. Which brings us to the ultimate question. Is Enoch's story dangerous? If a human can become something angelic, who gets to try? What makes someone worthy? And how do we know when we're ready? Third Enoch warns us. This path is not for the reckless. It speaks of mystics who reached too far, too fast, and were burned by divine fire. The Talmud tells a story of 4 sages who entered the orchard, a metaphor for deep mystical exploration. One died, one went mad, one became a heretic. Only one, Rabbi Akiva, entered in peace and left in peace. The lesson is clear. Yes, transformation is possible. Yes, the divine is reachable, but not without cost, not without courage, and not without purity of intent. Still, the door is open. The stories remain. The whispers continue. And if Enoch walked the path and became light, who's to say you can't? The ancient dream of transformation, it seems, is far from dead. In fact, it has evolved into new forms, shifting from spiritual transcendence to more modern ideals such as psychological self-actualization and technological transhumanism. Both these paths grapple with the same fundamental question. Can we become more than human? If you could somehow explain to the ancient Merkavah mystics that in the 21st century, humans would be discussing ways to upload their consciousness into machines, merge with artificial intelligence, genetically modify their descendants, or extend life indefinitely through biotechnology, they might have recognized the dream immediately. Yes, the details have changed, but the core impulse is remarkably similar. The desire to transcend the limits of our mortal bodies and become something greater remains the same. Transhumanism, an intellectual and cultural movement advocating for the transformation of the human condition through technology, is essentially the ancient dream of transcendence translated into modern, secular scientific language. The transhumanists don't speak of ascending through 7 heavens. They speak of progressing through technological stages. First, there's biological humanity, then augmented humanity, followed by post-humanity. They don't invoke divine names. Instead, they speak in terms of genetic codes, neural interfaces, and quantum computing. They don't seek transformation into angels, but into what they call post-human beings, a form of existence so far beyond current humanity that we will be as different from our evolutionary ancestors as they were from us. This parallel isn't accidental. Both traditions share a deep discomfort with human limits: aging, death, ignorance, weakness, suffering. Both promise that these limitations are not permanent but provisional. With the right knowledge and practices, both suggest we can overcome them. Both view transformation as a kind of ascent, a journey that moves us from crude materiality towards something more luminous, powerful, and enduring. But here's where the distinction lies. In the ancient Enochic tradition, transformation wasn't merely a technological or biological process. It was embedded within a moral and theological framework. Enoch transforms because he walked with God. His ascent requires righteousness. The mystics who followed his path underwent rigorous ethical and spiritual preparation. Their transformation was not seen as a technical achievement but a moral and spiritual one. Transhumanism, on the other hand, largely brackets moral questions in favor of technical ones. It doesn't ask whether we should transcend human nature, it asks how we might transcend it. This shift from viewing human nature as something sacred and given to viewing it as something malleable and improvable mirrors a broader modern shift in how we think about humanity. Yet, even within transhumanism, we still see ancient patterns emerging. For example, Nick Bostrom, one of transhumanism's leading philosophers, speaks of existential risks, threats that could prevent humanity from reaching its post-human potential. These risks include nuclear war, engineered pandemics, or the rise of malicious artificial intelligence. These existential dangers are not unlike the angelic gatekeepers in Merkavah mysticism, forces that must be navigated with wisdom and caution. The mystic who ascends without preparation is destroyed. Likewise, a civilization that advances transformative technologies without wisdom risks self-destruction. Interestingly, the psychological tradition offers another perspective. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs culminates in self-actualization, the realization of one's full potential. Yet, later in his career, Maslow added a higher category: self-transcendence. This involves moving beyond personal concerns to reach a state of cosmic consciousness, unity with all being, and peak experiences of the divine. Carl Jung, too, explored the idea of transformation through his concept of individuation, where the ego integrates both consciousness and unconsciousness into a greater wholeness, symbolized by archetypal images such as the divine child or the wise old man. From this viewpoint, Enoch's transformation into Metatron can be seen as a profound example of successful individuation. The ego, having undergone moral development and aligned with divine will, walking with God, passes through a perilous journey, an ascent through the heavens, encounters with angelic powers, and finally achieves integration with the higher self, becoming Metatron. The person who completes this process is not the same as the one who began it. They have undergone a true transformation, transcending their original nature. What's especially compelling here is that these modern psychological interpretations still preserve an ancient truth. Transformation is not entirely self-generated. In Jung's system, the ego does not create the self, it discovers and aligns with it. Self-realization requires both effort and surrender. In a similar manner, Enoch's transformation is both earned and given. Enoch's moral effort, his walking with God for 365 years, lays the groundwork. But the actual ascent, the moment of divine transformation, comes when God opens the heavens. It is grace as much as effort. This paradox, transformation as both achievement and gift, appears across mystical traditions. The Zen practitioner may sit in meditation for years, but enlightenment, when it comes, arrives suddenly and without warning. The Christian mystic spends years in prayer and contemplation, yet union with God is experienced as grace, not accomplishment. The Sufi traveler journeys through spiritual stages, but annihilation in God, fana, is God's work, not the mystic's. In our modern, secular age, however, the question is raised: can we achieve transcendence purely through technological means? If transformation is purely a product of human will and ingenuity, what becomes of the essential dimension of receptivity, grace, surrender, and divine guidance? Can we engineer our way to transcendence? Or does transcendence by its very nature require us to open ourselves to something beyond our control? The Enochic tradition offers an answer. Transformation requires both human effort and divine action. Enoch had to walk with God to prove his righteousness, but it was God who performed the transformation. The mystic must prepare, purify, and learn the divine names. But the actual ascent, the moment when the heavens open, comes as a gift. This tension between human effort and divine grace, between technique and surrender, is at the heart of both ancient mystical traditions and modern debates. Transhumanism largely ignores this tension, focusing on the how rather than the why. Psychology acknowledges it, but struggles to integrate it with the materialism of modern science. The ancient texts, by contrast, place this paradox at the center of their vision of transcendence. Perhaps this is why the Enochic tradition continues to captivate us. These ancient texts don't just offer a dream of transcendence, they offer a warning. They remind us that transformation is not neutral. It can either elevate us to the divine or consume us in fire. It requires not just power, but wisdom. Not just knowledge, but righteousness. Not just ambition, but humility before something greater than ourselves. In an age when we stand on the cusp of technologies that could radically alter the very fabric of human nature, technologies like gene editing, artificial intelligence, and cybernetic enhancement that promise to make our descendants as different from us as we are from our pre-human ancestors, the Enochic tradition offers both encouragement and caution. Yes, transcendence is possible, but the path is narrow. Many who attempt it will be lost. Returning once again to the ancient texts, we find not just myth or mysticism, but an enduring vision of what human life could become. A vision that continues to haunt and inspire. Let's revisit that moment where we began. Enoch standing before the throne of God, his flesh beginning to burn. What happens in that moment? Third Enoch describes it with breathtaking specificity. Enoch's body doesn't simply transform in a vague, abstract way. Each part of him is altered. His flesh becomes fire. His senses turn to flame. His bones burn like coals. Even his features, his eyebrows, eyelids, eyelashes, turn into lightning. The transformation is not a metaphorical change, but a detailed metamorphosis. This specificity matters. It suggests the text is trying to communicate something real about transformation, even if we read it symbolically. Change isn't broad or generalized. It's particular. Each aspect of the old self must be confronted, dissolved, and transmuted. The transformation is painful. Flesh turning to fire is not a gentle process. It requires the complete dissolution of what you were in order to become what you could be. Across cultures, transformative fire appears as a central metaphor. In Zoroastrianism, souls must pass through molten metal at the final judgment, a trial that feels like warm milk to the righteous but torment to the wicked. In Christianity, Pentecost brings tongues of fire upon the apostles, transforming them from fearful disciples into bold preachers. In alchemy, the prima materia must be burned, dissolved, purified, and reconstituted through repeated firings before the philosopher's stone is achieved. In Hinduism, the kundalini rises like fire through the chakras, burning away impurities until the soul unites with the divine. Fire transforms by destroying. It doesn't preserve the original substance. It breaks it down, releases energy, and leaves behind either ash or transmuted matter. To be transformed by fire is to accept the annihilation of the old self as the price of becoming the new self. What makes Enoch's story so profoundly impactful, even for modern audiences, is not whether we believe it literally happened. Its true power lies in what it reflects back to us. All of us, at some point in life, pass through fires we didn't expect. The loss of innocence, the end of a relationship, a sudden illness, a job that crumbles, a confrontation with death. These are the crucibles of existence. Moments when everything we thought we were gets stripped away. And yet, something remains. Something emerges. Changed, maybe even scarred, but wiser, more whole. The Enochic tradition gives voice to this universal human experience. It declares that true transformation doesn't come from simply adding new traits to our old self. It comes from letting the old self die. You don't become Metatron by layering celestial powers on top of who you were. You become Metatron by no longer being Enoch. The name is different. The essence changes. What was is no longer. And yet, somehow, continuity still exists. That continuity is crucial. Even after becoming a divine being, Metatron remembers. In 3rd Enoch, he reveals his identity to Rabbi Ishmael. I am Enoch, son of Jared. The transformation hasn't erased the past. It has elevated it. Enoch isn't forgotten. He is transfigured. His story remains woven into the divine narrative. And this echoes our own experiences, too. People who undergo profound changes through spiritual awakening, psychological breakthroughs, even just the long, slow burn of life experience, often describe this same paradox. I'm still me, they say, but everything is different. This mystery that we can undergo complete change and still remain ourselves is at the very core of conscious life. The Enochic texts don't just state this, they dramatize it. They give it shape. They give us a mythic framework for what otherwise feels ineffable. That the self can burn and survive. That we can be utterly transformed, and yet still remember who we were. But this brings us to a question many viewers may be asking. Should any of this be taken literally? Did Enoch truly ascend into the heavens and return as an angel? Ancient believers would likely say yes. Many modern scholars, however, view these texts as theological storytelling, beautiful, complex, and symbolic. But perhaps there's a third option, an idea that opens more doors than it closes. Maybe these texts aren't just either history or fantasy. Maybe they are maps, frameworks, blueprints for human consciousness. They describe possibilities not of physics but of awareness, of identity, of soul. Across the world, in indigenous cultures, shamanic traditions tell of practitioners who leave their bodies, travel to other worlds, transform into spirits or animals, and return with wisdom. Anthropologists studying these cultures don't usually ask, did this literally happen? Instead, they ask, what do these journeys mean? What do they change? How do they affect the individual and their community? And the answer is this: they do something. The journey matters, whether or not it occurred in what we call objective reality. Likewise, the Enochic transformation, when meditated upon, when internalized, when ritualized through prayer or contemplation, becomes real. The mystic who visualizes Enoch's ascent imagines the burning away of flesh into fire, the enthronement beside the divine. That person doesn't remain unchanged. They undergo a shift in consciousness, a reframing of self, a sacred reorientation. Even if their body never leaves the ground, their inner world does. And to say this is just metaphor would be to miss the point entirely, because metaphors aren't just literary devices. They're the way human beings have always structured their understanding of what's possible. The metaphor of fire transforms the idea of pain into purification. The metaphor of ascent reshapes struggle into progress. The metaphor of transformation redefines suffering as the seed of becoming. So, when we say that Enoch became Metatron, we are affirming something eternal. That human beings can change. That our current condition is not fixed. That transcendence is not out of reach. And even if you doubt the cosmology, the theology, or the literalism of the story, that truth remains. That truth changes how we live, because it reminds us that we're not stuck. We're not finished. That hidden within each of us is something radiant, something divine, waiting to emerge. If only we can find the courage to walk through the fire that burns away all that hides it. The Enochic texts preserve this truth. They whisper it in stories that orthodoxy tried to bury, in symbols that dogma feared. They remind us that once, humanity dared to imagine more than service to the divine, but union with it. Not just kneeling before God, but sitting beside God. Not just reaching for goodness, but becoming something terrible, powerful, and beautiful beyond comprehension. And so, here we are. We've walked beside Enoch through the winding staircases of the seven heavens. We've explored Second Enoch with its vision of layered cosmic architecture. We've delved into Third Enoch, where transformation becomes radical theology. We've examined the scholarly disputes over origins, the echoes of this myth in Christianity, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, psychology, and transhumanism. We've looked inward, outward, and upward, and yet the central mystery remains. Is it real? Can humans truly transcend what they are? Is there something divine lying dormant in us, waiting to be awakened? Or is transcendence merely a comforting dream, something we invent to soften the sharp edge of mortality? The Enochic tradition doesn't answer that question for us. What it offers is a vision, provocation, a map. It whispers, this happened once, it could happen again. The heavens, it says, are not closed. The throne beside the eternal is not vacant. The transformation is possible. Whether we take that as literal truth, symbolic guidance, or psychological metaphor, the effect is the same. We are reminded that who we are now is not all we can be. We are invited to imagine more. In an age where artificial intelligence, gene editing, and virtual realities are reshaping what it even means to be human, the ancient vision of Enoch is more relevant than ever. Yes, transformation is possible, but it's not neutral. Power alone doesn't make one divine. Technology without wisdom becomes destruction. As Enoch's story teaches, the path upward is steep, the fire is real, and the cost of transformation may be everything we currently are. The texts hold this tension. They offer hope, but also humility. They say, you were made for more, but more may destroy you if you're not ready. You must not only want the light, but also be prepared to burn away the darkness. Perhaps that's why Enoch's story continues to ignite imagination across centuries. He walked with God. Every step, one for each day of the cosmic year, was a movement toward wholeness. Until, at last, he was no more. He became something else. Something luminous. Something enduring. Metatron, the angel of the presence. The scribe of heaven. The youth older than time. The one who sits beside the divine. In becoming this, Enoch became a symbol, a signpost, a signal to all those who come after him. He represents both the possibility and the peril of transformation, a challenge and an invitation. So, the real question now is not about Enoch, but about you. Are you ready to let go of the self that no longer serves you? Are you ready to pass through the fire? Are you ready to transform? Because the heavens are still open, the fire still burns, the path still rises, and the throne beside the divine is not yet filled. The ancient texts have done their part. They've preserved the mystery. They've lit the flame. They've drawn the map. What you do with it is up to you. This is Mind Manifestor, and if this journey stirred something within you, if it ignited a spark of wonder, curiosity, or yearning, then stay with us. There are more paths to explore, more mysteries to unfold, more flames to walk through, because here we don't just seek answers, we seek transformation. Subscribe if you haven't already, and prepare because the next ascent begins soon. Until then, keep rising. The fire waits, the heavens remain, and so does your journey.